welcome to the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with him as usual is Rich. Hello, Rich.
What is going on, Jason?
Not a whole lot. We're in the regular season, of course, in the NBA as we speak. We're not too deep into it, but deep enough into it where some things are happening. We can make some conclusions.
Yeah, not quite the doldrums quite yet. When does have we ever classified exactly when the doldrums is? Isn't that's kind of like February, isn't it?
Yeah,
like
I think it's
post All-Star game, like 2 weeks after the
Right.
All-Star game, and you're just like, oh man, we still have till May. Jesus,
Yeah, no, it does. It depends on the year, because sometimes I think it depends on how the races are shaking out or if there's much interesting going on in the league. But yeah, I think that's about the right time. I think I would agree. Well, this raises a question to me: is the regular season is about even the teams that make the finals and win the championship. It's about 80-90% of your season. What if we actually valued the regular season more than we do right now? Right now, we basically just view, you win in the playoffs, you win that tournament, you're the champion, you've accomplished it. If you were even like a really good regular season team and you fail in the playoffs, that's like a mark against you. There's no real positive to being great in the regular season unless you're also great in the postseason. But I think we should adjust our thinking on that a little bit.
Yeah, and we're on this show. I think we've always been people that look at a little bit more beyond the rings, because I mean that to me is like the most lame, boring argument ever to make in sports, when you just say, well, that guy's got more rings, or they won more rings, or this guy won a ring. And it's like, yeah, I get it. It's cool that they won the tournament and all that sort of stuff, and there's obviously some value to that. But why do we negate a conference finals appearance? Why do we negate, as you said, great regular seasons like that? Nothing is lost to me by the Warriors winning 73 games and losing in the finals. I mean, a lot of people would disagree and say, no, it doesn't mean a thing without the ring, yada yada yada. But like, to me, no, that was awesome to watch them win 73 games. It was awesome to watch them dominate the regular season and whatnot. So I am, and I know you are, and a lot of the people who listen to this understand that there is value to what happens in the regular season. Some people would be fine with the regular season going away and then just start the playoffs. You know what I mean? Just be the playoffs and just win rings or whatever. But I like to think that we think a little bit deeper than that. So I like this idea of kind of looking at the regular season, looking at who would maybe win a championship if we counted the regular season wins, and how that sort of changes NBA history and changes some stuff. Because no, I do think there is a lot of value to playing great in the regular season. Like there's something to be said for that. But we, time and time again, as you said, we see examples where teams win a bunch of games and then don't win in the playoffs, and that's, as you said, a more of a negative. You're better off winning 55 games than winning the championship than winning 65 games and losing in the final, the finals or the conference finals or whatever. And we've seen it go so nuts to where, like, the Warriors, as I said, again, they win 73 and then lose in the finals, and then people say, oh, they were trying to win too many games in the regular season, and then it led to some boring Warriors regular seasons where they just didn't try as hard because they wanted to make sure they were at full strength and fully healthy for the playoffs so they could win their ring or whatever. So we become ring obsessed in NBA discourse and basketball discourse. So we're going to try to hopefully change it a little bit. We're still going to give out rings, but we're going to be a little bit better about it. We're going to count the regular season. We're going to got the big thing and not just the tournament. So.
Right, yeah. So, however you want to think about this, either we're, giving the regular season some equity with the postseason, and we're just saying, okay, your regular season pennant is equal to a championship, or you can just imagine, hey, no one came up with the idea of having a postseason, and we just decide, okay, the champions here are the teams that won in the regular season. So just looking at the idea of what you do in the regular season is maybe a larger reflective of the quality of your actual team, rather than in the postseason where some flukes can happen, injuries can happen, and obviously there are some differences between the postseason and the regular season, and we're not discounting that at all. It's a fun exercise to kind of talk about, and a way to spotlight a few teams that really don't get talked about because they didn't have postseason success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the NBA, I think of all leagues, we do see the least amount of quote unquote parity in the playoffs, where typically the team that wins the championship at the end of the year, you go, yeah, that team deserved to win. They had this guy, they had the best stars, there's some reason why they win. It's very rarely like, I can't believe that team's there or whatever. There's a few cases here and there we'll talk about, but very, very rarely do they do that. But as we go through this exercise, you'll notice that there aren't a lot of, oh my God, I can't believe that team in these regular season championships either. It's a little bit more fun. There's a little bit more variety. There's some teams that are a little bit like, oh yeah, I forgot about them, or oh yeah, they were really good, that got lost to time because of the rings, players that got lost to time because they didn't finish the job or win the rings or whatever. So I think there's some value to that as well. We're not saying that the playoffs are just complete crapshoot and who the hell cares or whatever. We're not saying that at all, but we're saying that, there's just not, in my mind and in your mind, there's just not a lot of value given to success in the regular season, and we're trying to do that as well. And it's just a fun exercise that we do on the show. We mess around, we fuck around, and then we change NBA history while we talk about NBA history. So I cannot wait to
change to NBA history. Yes. So we're going to.
The Celtics win 0 titles. They never win. No, it's a lie. They win a lot. They win so many. They win more, I think. Actually.
They win a lot. They don't win more, but they still win a lot. So, yes. So we begin 1947 with. It's because this is actually before the NBA exists. We're going to go with the first year of the BAA and also look at what the NBL champion did at the time. So 2 champions are crowned during this era. In the BAA, we have the Washington Capitals, coached by Red Auerbach, and they finished 49-11. They had a 8.99 SRS, which was first in the league. It was actually the highest SRS in league history until 1971. So they were pretty dominant. They won the pennant by 10 games. They were starred some of our faves, Bob Feerick and Fat Freddie Scolari. We love Fat Freddie here.
Yeah.
And in real life, they lost to the Chicago Stags in the division series. And it was kind of an odd thing where the division winners actually met face-to-face in the round before the playoffs. For some strange reason, they decided to do that. So the Capitals were penalized by that, did not win a championship there. But they did, again, were very, very dominant in the regular season.
We'll move on to the NBL here. The Rochester Royals. They went 31-13 in the NBL. Royals included at this time Al Cervini, Bob Davies, Red Holtzman, Arnie Johnson, Fuzzy Levain, and Dolly King. Dolly King, one of the few African-American players in the NBL, and he was a former barnstormer with the famed New York Reds as well. So that's Dolly King. The Royals in real life lost to George Mikan's Chicago American Gear. So title town in Chicago, 1947 basketball. Let's go.
Yeah.
American Gears and Stags. I remember that as well. I mean, you couldn't, I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know anybody who was alive then. So nobody that I know, nobody that I knew that was alive then is still alive today. So I never got a chance to ask my grandpa about the great Stags American Gears celebrations of 1947. I imagine there were none of them. But anyway, they lost to the Chicago American Gears in the real life finals. The Royals would consistently be the number 2 team of the era and be foiled by Mikan throughout time, but in this, our regular season championships, they have won a title. So congratulations, Rochester Royals.
Yes, so both leagues have new champions now with our new regular season.
See, this is more fun.
Pennant winners. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So 1948, in the BAA, we have the St. Louis Bombers, who were 29-19, and they actually were 5th in the league in SRS. Baltimore actually won, but as we'll see, the stand-ins were extremely tight that year. They, in second place, were in a tie. The Baltimore Bullets, the Chicago Stags, and the Washington Capitals, all only 1 game behind St. Louis. And then the Philadelphia Warriors were 2 games behind St. Louis, and the Knicks were 3 games behind St. Louis. And pretty much everyone in the league beat up on the Providence Steamrollers, who finished 6-42. Not a good run for
not great. No, I mean, you want to definitely win more than that, but that's all right. Providence Steamrollers, it's okay. You'll come back next year. I'm sure it'll be fine. So.
Yeah, no, it's not good next year either. No, it's not good for the Steamrollers. Yeah, not an appropriate name. Well, I guess maybe
steamrolled
they were the
themselves.
Ones who were steamrolled.
Their confidence, maybe.
We are being steamrolled. I don't know. We have to workshop that one, but yes. And in real life, they lost to the Philadelphia Warriors in the division semifinals. The Bullets actually won the title last year. And honestly, I have to admit that outside of their 6'9", 185-pound center, Red, the Thin Man Roca, who was later an All-Star for the Nationals, not super familiar with any of the Bombers. They did have a Bellis Smalley on the team. He was 6th in points per game that year, 9th in actually field goal percentage. And also they had a guard, John Logan, who was a 3-time All-BAA second team. Outside of that, this team is largely a mystery to me, unfortunately. But we'll dive more into them.
Yeah.
Definitely our future St. Louis Bombers episode that we'll be doing. We'll
people have
shed some light there.
People have been we've been getting in our suggestion box that we have that's readily available for everybody. Bellis Swamley content has been at the top of that list, so we'll definitely have to appease our very rabid fan base who have been asking and begging for St. Louis Bombers content, so it's coming soon, definitely.
Yes. All the Bill sites out there are definitely going to be looking for some more content. Absolutely.
All right, we go to the NBL, and guess who wins again? The Rochester Royals break up the Royals. They are a new champion here, 44-16. They edge the Lakers by 1 game. No SRS is available at this point, but we can assume the Lakers were probably better, but we don't know for sure. They had a better scoring differential than the Lakers, so we'll see. Royals in this offseason added Bobby Wanzer and Arnie Rise into their core, so that's a hell of a core. That's a hell of a team as well. The Lakers, they also added some new guys. They added a guy named George Mikan and another guy named Jim Pollard, and that helped them turn from a 4-40 Detroit Gems team. Again, 4-40, not good. Instead, they turned into the Lakers, and they won the ABA title in real life, beating the Royals 3-1, and they would win many, many times again. But in this, our fake world, or whatever you want to call it, the Rochester Royals are back-to-back champions in the NBL. So congratulations, Rochester.
Nice job, Rochester. And 1949, well, it's a new league, but the same team in the BAA.
Titletown.
Rochester.
Titletown. We still refer to Rochester, New York as the Titletown. So.
We do. We do, absolutely, yeah. Well, there's more coming, too. They're not done yet.
That's what I said. They're going to keep racking them up. Man.
Yeah. Right, absolutely. 45-15. They were second in the league in SRS to the Lakers. They also edged the Lakers again by 1 game in a different league with their 3rd pennant in a row. The Lakers in real life, however, were able to beat the Royals as they often did in the division semis.
Yeah, now we'll move on to the NBL. So the NBL is still hanging around. The Anderson Duffy Packers. Yes, of course, the Anderson Duffy Packers. Yes, they went 49-15. This is the same champion, though. So it held strong with what was in the regular season and what was actually happened. The Anderson Duffy Packers, of course, won the final NBL title. Best known player and leading scorer was Frankie Bryan. They also had a player named Dillard Crocker, who played in both the BAA. He had 2 games with the Pistons and the NBL. So in 1 season, he played for both. And his nickname is Moose, and that is all we know about Dillard Crocker. So, but we want to learn more. So if you know anything about Dillard Crocker, please let us know. But Moose.
Yes, he passed away in 2014. That's how we know the Moose nickname, because it was in his obituary. But
that's a good run. That's a hell of a run. 2014. Yeah. That's not bad for old Moose. So.
Yeah, it's good. Good run for old Moose. Yeah, he seemed to have an interesting career. Played in a lot of cities in his pro basketball career, so he got around. In fact, his first team was the Detroit Vagabond Kings, and he was much like the Vagabond for his basketball career. So. So next we have a unified league, but the teams on top are pretty familiar. The Minneapolis Lakers and the Rochester Royals both had the same record, 51-17, but we've decided to give the team with the better SRS the tiebreaker. So the Lakers win that tiebreaker. They get their first pennant here. In real life, they won a first-place tiebreaker game versus the Royals on their way to the title. So it's a case of our exercise imitating life. And the Lakers already, of course, had George Mikan and Jim Pollard for a few years, but they were joined by Vern Mickelson and Slater Martin this season.
Great. Exactly what the Lakers needed. 2 more great players. Yeah, perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. and 51 is much the same. The Lakers were first again. In real life, the Lakers actually lost to the Royals in the division finals after Mikan broke his leg. The Lakers otherwise won 6 out of 7 titles in a row in the NBL, BAA, and NBA. So interesting little opposite effect here, where the 1 year it was broken up by the Rochester Royals, it was actually the Lakers that won that regular season because of that Mikan injury.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, the next season, 1952, that we're going to get to, another kind of art imitating life thing, but a little bit different. In 1952, Rochester. So not in real life. In 1951, they broke up the Minneapolis Lakers, a little dynasty here. In 1952, Rochester does it in our little exercise as well. They go 41-25. That was 4th best SRS in the league. Of course, Minneapolis had the top SRS of the league. They edged Syracuse and Minneapolis by 1 game and Boston by 2 games. So very, very slim margin for Rochester here. Royals take this one back from the Lakers and would end up with 4 pennants in 6 years and very close to a 5th as well. So again, congratulations to the Rochester Royals. They almost did it right there with the tiebreaker in 1950. But at this point, the Royals are still a solid team. They have Davies, Holzman, Arnie Johnson from all the way back in 1947, so the same cores there. Wanzer and Risen, who joined in 1948, and then Jack Coleman, another of the key players, joined in 1950 as well. So it's a pretty solid team. And this is probably the first major historical shift we've seen. Instead of the Lakers being the dominant team of the late 40s and early 50s and the Royals being morally an afterthought, they're equals. And that's kind of cool. Like the idea that, you know, we've kind of changed history a little bit where the Royals just got, you know, for a lack of a better term, steamrolled by the Lakers time and time again. In this exercise, we see the Rochester Royals being on equal footing. So yeah, Mikan is an all-time legend. The Lakers are an all-time great team, but the Royals are also, with those guys, with Davies and Holzman and Johnson and Risen and Wanzer and Coleman and all those sort of guys, are on equal footing. They also have a bunch of titles to their name as well. So it's kind of cool and pretty interesting as well. This is kind of the last breath, though, for this Royals team. They would remain okay for the next 2 seasons or so, but no more pennants for them. So it's the last, unfortunately, we're going to hear from the Rochester Royals. But they were fun in the early part of this adventure, winning many, many titles. So congratulations to Rochester.
Title town, Rochester, absolutely. Then 953, it goes back to the Lakers. They're 48-22, first in the league in SRS, very dominant. 954, they're 46-26. They're only second in the league in SRS to Syracuse. They won the title in real life, both in 53 and 54. That was the end, basically, for Mikan. The Lakers win 4 pennants in 5 years and then lost 3 close ones to the Royals, as we said, in 48, 49, and 52. Each of those times, they lost by only 1 game. So they came extremely close to being almost as dominant as they were in real life, but fell just short in our exercise, although, again, 4 pennants in 5 years, still pretty good.
Definitely. 1955, we move on here. The Fort Wayne Pistons making their first appearance on this list. And the Syracuse Nationals, they tied, but we are going to give the edge to the Fort Wayne Pistons because they were first in SRS. Both teams had 43 and 29 records. The Pistons win the SRS tiebreaker, as we mentioned, giving Larry Faust his Hall of Fame boost. So put him in the Hall. He's ready to go now. He's got his title.
Yes.
He's got his ring.
All right. Yes. Put it in Faust.
Yep, we'll have to email the Springfield, Mass, and let them know that Larry Faust indeed does have a ring, a regular season ring, but it counts all the same. Pistons also
it counts, yeah.
Had a super score Hall of Famer and 6-time All-Star George Yardley, as we've mentioned many times in the show before. I don't know if we mentioned this guy before, 4-time All-Star Mel Hutchins, who's actually Kiki Vandeweghe's uncle. So I bet those basketball games on like 4th of July were pretty fucking awesome between Mel Hutchins and Kiki Vandeweghe. They also have...
And Ernie, of course. Ernie, who was Kiki's dad, who was brother-in-law of Mel. So.
Right. So that's a hell of a game, man. You got like 3 solid NBA players there. His son played a little bit as well, if I remember correctly, Kiki Vandeweghe's son. I think maybe he's in the front office of some team or something. I forget exactly what's going on, but that's current. We don't care about the current. That's stupid. No, we talk about current basketball. 4-time All BAA Max Zavlosky. This was the end of his career as well. This was the last run for him. Frankie Bryan, who we mentioned a little bit earlier, he's at the end of his career as well. Handy Andy Phillip. Love that name, Handy Andy Phillip. He was a 5-time All-Star, 2-time All-NBA, and a Hall of Famer as well. And then Bob, I never knew how to pronounce his name. Was it Hobregs?
I believe so, yes.
Well, whatever. He's a basketball Hall of Famer. We're not quite sure why. So Larry Faust doesn't go in, but Bob the Hobregs does. So that's, who knows. And the team, interestingly enough, coached by former ref Charlie Ekman. I love the idea of a former referee coaching a team. I would love to see Dick Vivetta on like the sideline of like the Kings or something like that. Like, can you just imagine? Like, I don't know why. I think he'd be good too. I'm trying to think of who like other referees that I would really, really like to see coach. But I think Dick's at the top of my list
Crawford?
for sure.
Yeah. Joey Crawford, I would imagine.
Oh, Joey Crawford. Yeah, if you need a guy to like speak to the mind of 19-year-olds, it's definitely Joey Crawford is a guy that would
sure.
Definitely. But some stupid team would. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to. The problem is like the Knicks aren't like as stupid as they used to be because like they would hire.
Even
Joey
the
Crawford.
Kings, yeah,
but
yeah.
The Kings are like kind of competent too. It's no fun anymore. We don't have any incompetent teams anymore. I'm sure some will pop up here and there. They always do. But
one of these days, yeah. So next is the Philadelphia Warriors, 1956, and they finished 45-27, and were both the regular season champion and in real life the final NBA champion before the Bill Russell era began. Their key players were, of course, Hall of Famers Paul Arizin, Neil Johnston, Tom Gola, and also Jack George and Joe Grabowski. Most of those guys were Philly products as well. They loved their homegrown guys. So yeah, they were the end before we really dive into this new era.
Yep, but thankfully with our exercise, the Celtics are nothing, and they're hold on one sec. 1957, Boston wins. Same champion as there was in real life. They won by 6 games, winning 44 games. Bill Russell and Tommy Heinsohn joined Bob Cousy, Bill Sharman, Frank Ramsey, and Jim Lustikoff. So Boston gets their first title in our exercise. 1958, Boston wins the championship, just as they did in real life. This time they win by 8 games. 49-23, they had Casey Jones and Sam Jones because, of course, they needed more good players. And the Hawks, unfortunately, lose the franchise's only ring, meaning Bob Pettit never earns a title. So this is the one time when the Hawks got their chance. They won the Bill Russell trade for a year, and then in our exercise they did not, and they never did. So unfortunately, Bob Pettit and the Hawks never get their title. 1959, Boston wins by 3 games. 1960, Boston wins by 10 games. 1961, Boston wins by 6 games. 1962, Boston wins by 6 games. 1963, Boston wins by 5 games. This is Bob Cousy's final season and Job Havlicek's first season, so of course they get retooled and ready to go. 1964, Boston wins by 4 games. 1965, you guessed it, Boston wins by 13 games. 62-18, they win 9 pennants in a row, so they actually do better than the real-life Pistons do the real-life Celtics do at this time, because they did not drop that one to the Hawks. So 9 pennants in a row for the Boston Celtics during the Bill Russell era. So, yep, they're still dominant. They're still good.
They're still dominant, but they don't win a title afterward. We don't get that late little charge in Bill Russell's career. Those last 2 championships that go on, so it changes things a little bit. I mean, 9 championships still, is not much worse than 11 championships, and 9 in a row, is more than they won in real life. So, it's, I think they're just about as legendary as they were, but it does change that just a little bit. And I think that's kind of interesting the way that goes down. Yeah, I was going through this. I was surprised at how truly dominant they were in the regular season. Like, I kind of, I knew they finished in first place, pretty much all of these years. And I knew that they led the league in SRS, but the margins that they won by in both SRS and in record generally was, either super dominant or pretty dominant. I mean, they just were always the best,
right.
Playoffs and regular season.
Yeah, and SRS shows that out as well. And it's like, yeah, you would think in like 1962, after they've won, 5 straight or whatever, that they would just be like, let's take it a little easy in the regular season. No, they win it by 6 games or 16 games better than everybody else. Like, that's just like the idea that they just never, either they couldn't take off, or they were just so good that even if they didn't give full effort, they were still beating people, or they just gave full effort all the time and went out there to try to win as much as they did. But there's no signs that this team ever said, hey, let's take it relatively easy in the regular season because we know in the postseason we're gonna win. They just went pedal to the metal the entire time, and yeah, the winning by 3 games, 10 games, 6-6, 5-4. There was no squeakers here, no other contenders really. They just dominate this entire decade.
Absolutely. So next, we move into a new era, both in terms of the NBA having a new dominant team, and pretty soon the ABA is going to join us. So 1966, Philadelphia 76ers, 55-25. They were second in the league in SRS to Boston, but they did edge Boston by 1 game in the regular season. In real life, they lost to the Celtics in the East Finals 4-1. This was the first full year for Wilt Chamberlain with the team. They also had veteran Hal Greer and a young core of really excellent players, Chet Walker, Wally Jones, Luke Jackson, and Billy Cunningham was a rookie this year. And they were coached by Dolph Schayes. And like I said, in real life, a very good team, but not quite a dominant team. But that was definitely about to change.
Absolutely, yeah. They'd win again, as you said, in 1967 as well, 68-13. Same champion that they were in real life as well. So, of course, this team sets the league record for winning percentage. Same core. New coach Alex Hannum, who shifted their style of play, obviously found ways to unlock even more potential out of Wilt Chamberlain, and it led to just tremendous success, which is interesting because, yeah, we now see, and we'd see it even as we're going to talk about in 1968 as well. Philadelphia wins in the post-Russell. They won the last championship pre-Russell. So basically, you have to go back to 1955 to find the last time when a team not from Boston or Philadelphia won the championship. And unfortunately, as Jason will mention, it doesn't change in 1968 either.
No, it does not. They are slightly less dominant, but still very good, 62-20. Their third pennant in a row. Obviously, that is going to do a whole lot to change the idea of, Wilt Chamberlain's career and the narratives that were built on there, even though he's not going to have nearly as many titles as Russell still. 3 in a row to kind of end the Russell era and to sort of lead into this era, I think definitely adds some steam for him historically. In real life, they blew a 3-1 lead to the Celtics, and Wilt forced his trade to the Lakers in the offseason. Now, we're not really considering a lot of what might happen in real life. Let's say if these if these changes happened and Wilt won 3 titles in a rear, obviously it's probably less likely that he would have gone to the Lakers in that situation. We're not obviously accounting for that sort of stuff. We're just going to say, well, everything happened the way that it happened. We're just interpreting it in a different way. Mm-hmm. So I don't want people to write and complain to us about that, because we understand that we're having fun here.
Yeah, it'd be very, very difficult to rewrite history to that level as well, because there's like a case that'll be made here in a little bit where it's like, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the Bucks are like the greatest team ever. Like, why would he ever leave Milwaukee? Right. Where like, he just stays in Milwaukee for 20 years, or like, and then it just becomes untenable and ridiculous. So yeah, we're not doing that. We're assuming that guys still move and do stuff. We're just kind of saying, what kind of happened in real life and what would have happened in the regular season. So yeah, we're not rewriting history too much here. So
yeah,
gotta keep some fabric of of it. So.
Right. And in the ABA, we have
the ABA. Welcome.
Yeah,
welcome to the fray.
Yeah, welcome. Yes. The Pipers, 54 wins. They were actually 4th in the league in SRS to the New Orleans Buccaneers were first. They did win the championship in real life. They were led by Connie Hawkins, of course, was their big star, coming out of obscurity and going into the ABA and eventually playing his way into the NBA, winning his legal case there. Also, they had Charlie Williams, Trooper Washington, Chico Vaughn, and Art Heyman were their key guys. Charlie Williams and Chico Vaughn both were prodigious three-point shooters. Charlie Williams actually made a lot of them, and Chico Vaughn liked to shoot a lot of them. So,
right.
I think that year he made a lot of them too, but generally not the highest percentage there. In real life, the Pipers actually did beat the Bucks in the first ABA Finals. The Bucks had Doug Moe and Larry Brown as their key players in the first ABA Finals.
Yeah, the numbers on Chico Vaughn, I should say, we've talked about him before, but in our Basketball Mysteries of the 70s episode a little bit. He's not the most ridiculous three-point shooter in the ABA. There's plenty of other guys, but he is pretty ridiculous. He's fairly ridiculous. His first year, he shoots 5.5 attempts per game. Hits 33%. That's not bad. I'll take that. Next year, he bumps it up to 7.6, which is ridiculous numbers for 1969, obviously, because we hadn't seen anybody shoot with the three-point line before. But he only shoots 27% from three then. And the next year, someone told him, hey, knock that shit off, because then he only shoots 3.9 threes per game. It only hits 29%. So the first year he was pretty good with it, but then he got a little nuts there in year 2. But not a bad run for Chico Vaughn. But yeah, he is only one of many guys who decided this 3-point line, I am going to use this and utilize it, which was risky at the time. I mean, there was it was not a good idea to it was a bad shot to take a 3-pointer. Now those days are very, very long gone, because now it's, if you don't take a 3 or a shot at the rim, you are a bad player and inefficient and all that other stuff. So it's pretty interesting to see that.
Stink. Yeah. Yes. So 1969, in the NBA, we have the Baltimore Bullets, 57 wins, and they were 4th in the league in SRS. The Knicks were actually number 1, and this would make a new champion because this would have been the final Celtics championship. And they were a big story of the NBA regular season. They had a 21-game improvement, and really all they did was add Wes Unseld to the team as a rookie. The Earl Monroe had been there, Gus Johnson, Kevin Lockery, Jack Marin, Ray Scott, and Leroy Ellis. In fact, Unseld won MVP that year, despite not particularly having, dominant numbers, but, because of the impact that he had on the team. And, the other team that emerged that year was the Knicks, who also had a not quite as big of a turnaround, but a fairly sizable one. They won 54 games. And then after the trade for Dave DeBusschere, were 36-9 that year. So, which made the playoff result a little bit less surprising. The Knicks actually swept the Bullets that year with Gus Johnson out of the series for the Bullets. So given the Knicks' success in the second half of the season, that made a little bit more sense, but otherwise it was a little bit, I believe, a surprise at the time.
ABA-wise, we have a repeat champion. The same champion that happened in the actual ABA happens in our little hypothetical as well. The Oakland Oaks, they go 60-18. They were first in SRS as well, so definitely a deserving champion here. Led by Warren Jabali, Doug Moe, Larry Brown, Ira Harg, and Gary Brads. They also had 35 games with Rick Barry, which we have discussed at length in our Basketball Mysteries of the 70s, if you want to listen to all that happened with Rick Barry and the Oakland Oaks and all that fun stuff there. But they win. Same thing they did in ABA, the Oakland Oaks win. So not a lot of interesting stuff coming out of the ABA quite yet. The most dominant team in the regular season so far has been the most dominant team in the playoffs as well. So pretty cool to see that.
Yeah. And Rick Barry, of course, was the subject of our first episode way back when. The first guy we dove into. I think we've I don't think we've had more jokes about Rick Barry than we've had about. I'm not sure who our actual number one target is. Probably Danny Ainge.
I was going to say Danny Ainge. I've included.
Yeah.
There's like coming in what I believe will be part 2 of this, mostly of this show. There is no less than 15 potential Danny Ainge jokes. So
nice. All right. Well,
so yeah, it's coming. So yeah, no, Rick Barry may have taken a temporary lead, but I assure you, Danny Ainge will take a resounding lead when part 2 of this comes out. So.
Well, thank goodness. So, 1970, we have the same champions again that we had in real life. The New York Knicks, 60-22, first in the league in SRS. Of course, this is the Clyde Frazier, Dave DeBusschere, Willis Reed, great teams. The Pacers, 59-25, actually only second in the league in SRS to Denver, and of course, Roger Brown, Freddie Lewis, Mel Daniels. We've talked about both those teams quite a bit in our 70 series, so we're not going to dive deeply into them here. You can go back and listen to those shows if you'd like. And then 1971, in one case we have the same champion of the Milwaukee Bucks, 66-16, 11.91 SRS, which shattered the record at the time for SRS. And still one of the top 5 or so in league history. And in the ABA, the Pacers win again. They finish 58-26, 563. SRS second in the league to Utah. In real life, they lost in the Western Division Finals to Utah, and this means that the Pacers only win 2 ABA pennants as opposed to 3 championships in 4 years. So that reduces their legacy somewhat. And they were kind of a team that at a certain point they started to a little bit coast in the regular season and turn it on in the playoffs. They kind of had a reputation for doing that. Absolutely,
yeah, and we talked about that at length in previous shows as well. So yeah, it kind of bears it out here a little bit where they aren't as dominant in our exercise that they were kind of in real life, or not as good at sort of sealing the deal in our exercise that they did in real life. So yeah, the cool stuff there. Move on to 1972. We get in the NBA, of course, the Los Angeles Lakers are your champions in the NBA. In real life and in this exercise as well. They go 69-13, so pretty tough to mess with that. 11.65 SRS. So it's pretty interesting that, the year prior we got Milwaukee with one of the best SRSs of all time at 11.9, and the Lakers not far behind there just a year later at 11.65. So same champion there, nothing too exciting in Lakerland. In the ABA, though, we get a new champion with the Kentucky Colonels at 68-16. They are your champions. They have a 7.99 SRS as well. Kentucky wins their first ABA title easily. They're 8 games better than second place Utah. And it was kind of interesting as well because in this particular ABA season, there's really haves and have-nots. So you have your Kentucky and Utah. They both win 60-plus games. No other team won 50 games. Indiana wins 47 games, I should say. And so it's basically 2 teams with 60 wins, a team with 47 wins, and then a bunch of other teams kind of below them. So it's kind of interesting to see such a big disparity there. In real life, though, for people who did not follow this, Kentucky was upset by the 44-win Nets in the Eastern Conference semis. And then the 47-win Indiana Pacers, as we mentioned, they eventually win the title. So they coast a little bit in the regular season when they turn the Jets on come playoff time, and the Kentucky Colonels shockingly upset by the 44-win Nets in the Eastern semis. I mean, a lot of stuff changes with that as well because this is a dominant, like an all-time great ABA team that just doesn't really have a lot to show for it if we use just kind of the old rings method in terms of judging a team and their abilities and whatnot.
Sure, and this team would finally win a championship in '75. With a similar supporting cast. Artis Gilmore, Dan Issel, Louis Dampier, they're key guys. But yeah, this team definitely. I mean, the record obviously, 68 wins stands out and really being dominant this year. And then losing to Rick Barry's Nets, one of the bigger upsets in playoff history. So. So yeah, I do think that even though they would eventually win their real life title, I think having their, getting the credit for having this dominant regular season, we're not taking away from the disappointment of the playoffs. I think that maybe has a little bit more impact than even their title did in '75.
Right. As we said, like there's something to be said for being like a great, like an all-time great regular season team that doesn't get it done in the playoffs. Like we talk about this stunning upset or whatever, and we'll talk, in part 2, the Seattle Supersonics in 1994 when they have the first round upset to Denver. Yeah, it was a first round upset and it was nuts because it was an 8 seed beating a 1. But like that Seattle team is so good and they win so many games and they're such an awesome team, but they get upset and it becomes this thing that it's a monkey on their back and they just cannot get rid of it until it leads to kind of, in a lot of ways, the implosion of that entire franchise. But yeah, this same thing where they win 68 games and then fail to do it in the playoffs. I mean, it's reflected on a little bit more negatively than, like you said, if they had maybe won this title, and then that was it. Like, the idea is, hey, they were a dominant team, and they nailed it, and they got it all done in the playoffs, and they won, and they're an all-time great team or whatever. Whereas I don't know that we consider the Kentucky Colonels an all-time great team, just a team that eventually won a title and had some good regular seasons and whatnot. So we've changed that a little bit with our exercise here.
Sure. And another team that a little bit penalized for a great regular season and a playoff disappointment was the 73 Boston Celtics, who won 68 games. They were second in the league in SRS, so they definitely outperformed their SRS that year. As we say, we need another Boston title. This was their 10th overall, but their first is 1965, so it'd been a while for them. And they
poor babies.
Yeah,
they finally get their title.
Know.
Finally, again.
Very sad. So they actually won by 8 games as the Lakers and Bucks both finished 16-22 that year. In real life, the Knicks who won 57 games, would shock the world, come back and beat the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. John Havlicek suffered a arm injury midway through that series that was definitely had an impact, shoulder injury, I believe. And this was in our pennants. They're their only pennant of the decade. They would win 2 in real life in 74 and 76, but they would win it in the year again, with a gaudy win total. So that again, that kind of makes an interesting difference there.
Definitely. And then ABA, the Carolina Cougars, new champion here, 57-27. Their third actually in SRS. Kentucky is your leading SRS team. So like I said, Kentucky was great last year. They're still good as well. Carolina just squeaks by the prior year's champion Kentucky with 57 wins. Kentucky was at 56. Billy Cunningham gets himself another ring, and the first he has in the ABA as well. He wins 3, of course, in the late 60s with Philadelphia. Now he gets another one here. We'll talk about him in a bit because he also wins one as a coach. So Billy Cunningham doing it in all types of ways. And Coach Larry Brown, he gets his first title. He was like 29 years old at this point, and we are certain if they had won this, he would have worn overalls to the parade as well. So there's something to be said for the excitement there in Carolina. But they get their ABA title, and Larry Brown gets to wear his overalls at a parade. So good stuff.
Yeah, well, good for him. Yeah. 1974, we have the Milwaukee Bucks, who 59 wins, first in the league in SRS. They get 2 championships in a decade. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar cements himself as a legend already with 2 titles in his first. In his first 4 seasons, or I actually think his first 5 seasons, but and this kind of raises the question: does this championship and the Bucks in real life met the Celtics in the finals? Does it make any difference in the way that he would have decision to leave Milwaukee? Now that came after a disappointing year the next year and some personal stuff, so maybe not. But it definitely you could see that. Oscar Robertson gets another championship as well. I don't know if he's penalized exactly, but the fact that he, getting 1 versus getting 2, that makes some difference in people's levers. So that's interesting idea as well. And yeah, the fact is the Bucks, as we talked about, they were so incredibly dominant in the regular season during this time, and they just happened to fall behind a Lakers team that had a 33 game win streak and a Boston team that kind of almost randomly won 68 wins. But in any other era, they would have been probably multi-time champions and would have been even greater than they are considered, which is obviously pretty great. Right,
and obviously it leads to some contention in Kareem's end as well. So there's a possibility that if they win those titles, Kareem just stays. He's okay with it. It's just there's a lot of interesting moving parts that could sort of happen there, and that's why it's interesting to look at this exercise and look at teams that may have been able to sort of change their histories a little bit had regular season been all it was and all that really mattered or whatnot. But yeah, interesting to see Milwaukee do it again here in 1974. In the ABA, the New York Nets are champions of 1974. Same champion that it was in the real life ABA as well, so not too exciting there. 55-29, they are first in SRS, so they are a well-deserving team. Interestingly enough, only 1 ABA pennant for Julius Erving, so he only does it once in the ABA, but we'll get to him hopefully in a little bit here, because I think this is not the last we've heard from old Julius.
Yeah, and that team, of course, with Larry Keenan, Billy Paultz, Brian Taylor, Super John Williamson, a very talented young team. Bill Melchione kind of being the veteran there. He'd actually would have gotten probably a couple championships in Philly. So that's another one in the notch for old Melchione. So, Going to 1975 now. In the NBA, we have the Washington Bullets and the Boston Celtics, both 60-22. Washington gets the SRS tiebreaker, deny the Celtics another championship, and also deny the Warriors a chance to have their real life upset in the 75 finals by sweeping the Bullets in a big surprise. So this means it's Wes Unseld's second title, but the also second title for the franchise after their 69 championship as well.
Yeah, I like the idea they win in 69 because we don't see like I think it's kind of unique because like the team is largely kind of the same, same kind of moving parts or whatever. It's like many years between them winning another title. It's like 69 and then they run it back, in 1975 with like the same kind of core, which is kind of cool to look at there. But yeah, Unseld's second title, which I think is very important. We'll get to him here in a little bit as well. But we're kind of changing a big narrative around like a Wes Unseld, and we're changing his trajectory as well. This is his second title now in the last handful of years, and we'll see it's not the last we heard from either Washington or Unseld. So definitely interesting stuff there. In the ABA, we have a new champion, the Denver Nuggets at 65-19, 6.63 SRS. Larry Brown gets himself another ring. He still wears overalls to the parade, so we were all good. The first title for Denver, but not the last, because we'll get to that here in a minute. So.
Yes, and this would be the first franchise. This would be this first title for the Nuggets in their franchise history.
Right,
so
correct.
Another adds on to them. 1976, even though they were denied in 75, they're back in 76. Rick Barry's Golden State Warriors, 59 wins, first in the league in SRS. And they, with Jamal Wilkes and their talented young core team, they take home a pennant, and Boston is denied another real life championship, which means they only had, as we talked about before, only had one for the decade instead of two. So we're making Dave Collins sad, which I guess because it's okay.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out who would be most affected by that. It's probably Dave Collins, right? Because Havlicek gets enough of like the late tier, ones like a Don Nelson. He obviously piled up a few as well. So I guess it would be Collins probably the most who would be affected, correct, by this idea of like the Celtics not winning those few titles in the 70s, right?
Well, actually, Havlicek only gets 4
Okay,
because he only wins the 3 from 63 to 65, and then only gets 4. So I think he had 8. So Nelson, I think also I would have had maybe just 3 or 4. So I think that makes a difference for those guys. I mean, Collins as well. I don't think that 70s team is. I think they're just overshadowed by the 80s team and by the 60s team. So I don't know if it vastly changes how they're remembered, but definitely,
right.
Havlicek's a Hall of Famer either way, but definitely 8 rings and 4 rings is a pretty big difference.
For sure, yeah. And then JoJo White's another guy as well. I think that gets completely gobbled up by this as well. But interesting, though. Sure. So we kind of changed the decade here a little bit by doing the regular season rings. In the ABA, Denver repeats as champion in our exercise. They go 60-24, first in the league in SRS. It's a new champion as well. They added David Thompson and Dan Issel and get their second pennant. Ralph Simpson, Bobby Jones, Byron Beck, and Claude Terry, are the only holdovers from the 75 team. So they actually change history a little bit and go back-to-back in the ABA, which I believe is in our exercise, the only back-to-back team in the ABA, if I remember correctly, right? Every other time it was moving on. Oh, no, Indiana, won in 70 and 71. So our second back-to-back in the ABA, and Denver becomes unfortunately, the last champion in the ABA, because by 77, there's no more ABA.
Yes. Well, another interesting thing that I just thought about, we are following history in a sense where we're spending the 70s with not having repeat champions in the NBA.
Right. Oh yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, it's like, so there's not even a dominant team. Like, who's the dominant team of this decade in our exercise? I mean, there's no. I mean, Milwaukee, kind of, sort of. Like, no, nobody. I mean, even the Knicks only pop up a few times. The Lakers pop up once. Boston pops up, once or twice. So yeah, it is art imitating life again, and it'd see it way through the entire 70s as well, because we'll talk about them here in a little bit. Where so that's it's kind of cool that the 70s are just what a wild decade. Where the 60s are dominated by regular season teams, the 50s are dominated by 2 big powers in Rochester and Minneapolis, and 70s are here's like 5 or 6 teams that are good. So definitely interesting.
Yes. So 1977. Probably a big surprise to a lot of people here. The Los Angeles Lakers are your champions, 53 wins. They were now 5th in the league in SRS to Portland. and they in real life, of course, lost to Portland. Were swept by them by Bill Walton's Blazers in the playoffs. But in the regular season, they were the best team in the league. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's third pennant of the '70s, winning the first with the Lakers. The team's first championships only since '72 when Jerry West was a player. Well, now he's a coach. And were denied the breaks of the game as Portland, despite having the league best 7 SRS, only won 49 games that year.
Yeah, so he throws it in the shredder and goes, this isn't going to work. You know what I mean? No, nuts, all right. And it just doesn't happen.
Yes.
So
now, do you think just like, not to disparage these players, but the second best player on the Lakers was probably either Lucius Allen or Cazzie Russell, who are, okay players,
right.
but not usually best players in championship team type things.
No, this is a very odd team. Like, why are they? No, this is just weird and icky. 77 belongs to the Blazers. No, you can't take it from them. So this exercise is stupid, Jason. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. So
I'm sorry, Rich. I did not mean to hurt your feelings.
We don't get breaks in the game either. That's so terrible. So, or do we? Yeah. Never mind. 1978. Halberstrom decides, fuck it. I'll get back on and see what I can do. And that's a good thing he did in 1978 because Portland goes 58-24. And they win the championship with a 5.92 SRS. Breaks of the game is delayed a year as Portland rights the ship from last season and wins the regular season title. They also avoid the painful Sonics upset. And Walton does get hurt playing in worthless playoff games because we just don't have the playoffs anymore. So Walton gets...
Right. No,
so Portland's great. Like, Walton stays there for 10 years. No foot injury, even though I think he broke his foot earlier in the year, so he probably would have still had foot injuries. But maybe he's not quite as upset. They win their title in 78. All is good in Portland. All is good with Bill Walton. Everything is right in the world, and Breaks of the Game does get published, just kind of differently. So,
sure, it's the glue of the game. Right,
they change it slightly.
There you go.
Do you think he runs it backward? Or does he just go, that's not going to work, and just moves on to something different, and we just never get it? So.
Maybe he writes about the Sonics, since the Sonics don't win a championship and they fail to win a championship. Maybe something crazy happens to Dennis Johnson or something.
Right, yeah. I'm sure Lenny Wilkins and Dennis Johnson had some crazy things going on, so I'm sure they could do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we're delayed a year, but we get the real Portland thing. This is just icky though. 1977, the Portland, doesn't win it. 1978, they do win it. So it's just kind of interesting and unique. But there you go. Again, Walton, he gets hurt. They get a huge upset against the Sonics. We changed history a lot here by getting the Portland all the way there. And they've had 2 seasons in a row where they've had decent contenders to be champions, so it's interesting. But again, the 70s curse kind of happens where there's still not a dominant. Lakers win one, they lose the next year. Portland wins one, and we're gonna find out they lose the next year yet again.
Yeah, and the team that you could sort of argue was the team of the 70s wins the 79 championship. The Bullets, 54-28. They were second in the league in SRS to the Spurs of all the teams, George Griffin Spurs. This would be the third pennant for Unseld, the second for Hayes. And again, not quite dynasty because it was 69, 75, and 79, but it's still, they have a pretty strong case as the team of the 70s now with those 3 championships. I know 69 isn't technically the 70s, but it's close enough. So I think that really, I think, makes them a more a team that's going to be looked upon differently historically because of just happening to have those 3 championships. I think that adds a boost to both Unseld and Hayes to a degree, and the other guys on that team.
Yeah, it's just it has to change the narrative a little bit if Washington wins. Yeah, I said dynasty's a little weird. They're kind of like that weird kind of Spurs dynasty thing where they take a few years off and then come back. They take a few years off and come back or whatever. But still, there's something to be said for Wes Unseld himself being kind of the glue that kept everything together. There was plenty of other players as well that kind of came back for all those teams as well. But a guy like Wes Unseld, though, he wins 3 titles in that decade or quote decade or whatever. I think that totally changes the narrative around him. And I think he's a guy who's still very well respected and a guy who has, not maybe the most eye-popping numbers, but man, if he wins 3 different rings, if he's kind of arguably the leader of the best team of the entire decade, there's something to be said for that as well. Also, Hayes winning his second title as well, I think is pretty important as well. So I think a lot of it changes with Washington because they become, as we said, kind of the de facto team of the decade in a lot of ways, and I think that does change versus kind of having a fluky win in one season and of course running it back and losing in the finals the following season. I think that would have been really interesting to see them just be this team that kind of popped up every few years and won a title, but alas, that's not how things went in real life. So
yeah, no. But for us, it counts. It's the Bullets win the pennant. The Bullets win the pennant. The Bullets.
It's a famous call.
Yes, the famous call. Yes, it was very famous. Is it better than the fat lady saying, or is it not as good as that?
Probably
Probably not as good as that.
Nah, probably not. But that's all right. It's close.
Probably not. That's all right. All right, fair enough. All right, Rich. Well, I think we are going to call this part one, and we will be back with part two in a little while. You can, of course, find Over and Back on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also find us at the Step Back at fansided.com/NBA. Where you can get a lot of chock full of NBA goodness, good writing, good podcasts, good statistical analysis and ion calculus, all that good stuff. And also, you follow us on your favorite social media channels. We are on Facebook and Twitter at Over and Back NBA. So thanks again for listening, and we're back again soon.